people out there that say maybe you shouldn't do that with one of the better players in the game. I guess what were you thinking?
I don't care. He's old.
He didn't poke the bear at all. He poured honey on him. That's what Dillon Brooks did. He poured honey on himself.
I'm here for the bullet. I'm ready to play, and that's it. I appreciate it.
And back the other way, 3-on-1. LeBron taking flight. Oh, sent it with his chest.
I've been doing this too long. I'm making enough statements.
He's been issued a flagrant foul penalty too and has been ejected from the game.
Yeah, see you later.
Fans making me a villain, the media making me a villain. That just creates a whole different persona on me. So now you think I intended to hit LeBron James in the nuts. I'm playing basketball, I'm a basketball player.
This is Hollywood, after all. Yep. The stage is set for Game 4 as we get you ready. Ramona Shelburne back with us, as well as Tim MacMahon, who's covering the Grizzlies for this series. So, Ramona, last game it was a blowout, right? Despite Ja Morant scoring 22 straight, which is wild in the fourth quarter, we saw all that was made of Dillon Brooks, right? But his rhetoric, his behavior, it's part of what makes the Grizzlies, but how are they viewing this internally?
Well, every time you ask a question, every time Dillon Brooks does something like this, you go to Tyus and you go to Desmond Bane, because those are the two adults that they always trust in front of the cameras. And they always say, we got our guys back. Yeah. But at some point, you kind of have to wonder, why isn't Dillon answering these questions, right? Like, he's the one who puts it out there. And Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane, Steven Adams used to be in that role before he got hurt. It comes to a point where this is where you need some veterans on this team, some guys that kind of take the load off there, because it's always the same two guys who are the mature ones. Tyus Jones has a couple of kids. He's he calls himself an old soul, but they're always having to answer for and back up the talk of Dillon Brooks and sometimes the talk of Ja Morant.
Well, I imagine, though, at the end of the day, this is a fine line, because it's what makes the Grizzlies, right? This is what they do. But then, when you look at the box score, and Dillon Brooks is 1 of 7 on jumpers, how is that reverberating?
Yeah, if you bark, you've got to bite. And look, you can't brick. Just straight up. And the way that the Lakers are playing him, those were invitation jumpers, right? They're packing the paint, sagging off Dillon Brooks and saying, if you want to beat us with your three-point shot, prove that you can do it. They're not guarding him. Now, you've got the crowd that's on him. You've got that whole thing. If Dillon Brooks is going to silence the crowd, he has to hit jump shots, because those shots will be there for him. And look, I don't think it's a coincidence that Ja Morant really got rolling when Dillon Brooks was off the floor. As much as he gives them on defense, and he is legitimately one of the best and most versatile defenders in the league, he has hurt them in this series offensively.
If you bark, you got to bite, you can't brick.
That was
a line, Tim MacMahon. That was a flourish. All right, but at the end of the day, he is an unrestricted free agent this summer. Obviously, you're referring to the fact that he got ejected in that last game that we saw. Should we expect Dillon to be a cornerstone of this franchise for years to come?
Stay tuned. This is going to be a very difficult decision for the Grizzlies front office this summer, as you said, when he becomes a free agent. But look, they've showed their cards. They tried to engage the Raptors in conversations about OG Anunoby. They threw 4 first-round picks at the Brooklyn Nets and said, we want Mikal Bridges. They drafted Zaire Williams in the first round, trading up to get him. They drafted another small forward this year in David Roddy. Neither of those guys are ready for that role, but there's a lot that comes along with Dillon Brooks. If he's not going to be part of this, they have to find a way to replace him. And again, we're talking about a guy who is guarding LeBron James in this series. If they win this series, he's guarding Steph Curry or De'Aaron Fox next round. Not a lot of guys in the league who can do that. Now, the chaos that comes along with him, the shot selection and challenges offensively, they've got to figure out, is this a guy they want to move forward with as a part of their core?
That's the balance that they're going to need to figure out, what ingredients all go well to get to their end result that they're hoping for. Game 4 is tonight in Los Angeles, and it is going to be a good one. But do you guys know who both barks and bites in these playoffs? Jimmy Butler. So still to come on NBA Today. We're getting into Jimmy Buckets because he was at it again. Can the Heat take a commanding 3-1 lead with Giannis set to return? We're going to assess the Heat culture coming up next.
Knicks, one victory away from advancing to the Eastern Conference semifinals. New York, stand up! New York, stand up! New York, stand up! One to go. Woo!
He said New York stand up. All right, well, the Knicks, they made a whole lot of noise this weekend, taking both games in Madison Square Garden. Yeah. They got a little 3-1 series lead here. Let's recap the weekend. We're going to do a little something called This or That. 24 seconds on the clock. I'm going to give you two options. Tell me which one has the bigger impact on the series. And Stephen A., we're starting with yours. So let's start with the Cavs and the Knicks. They're two big offseason acquisitions. Jalen Brunson has been the leading scorer in this series at 24 a game, and then Donovan Mitchell really struggled at Madison Square Garden, including going 5 of 18, 11 points, 6 turnovers on Saturday. So, Chiney, has Brunson or Mitchell been the biggest factor in this series?
Brunson by a landslide, just because what has he done for New York? I mean, brought new life into the Garden, and he is the first player since like 1968 to average at least 20 in his first 4 straight playoff games. Impressive. Also, multiple 25-point scorers, 50% shooting from the field. That's rare to get a team that's efficient on offense alongside stifling on defense. This is a JV effect.
Let's get to the other 4-5 matchup. My buzzer beater. All right, the Suns. They're also up 3-1 on the Clippers. Devin Booker, scorching hot. He leads all scorers in the playoffs at almost 35 points a game. We know the Clippers are missing PG. They're missing Kawhi. But, Perk, is this more about Booker's offense or the Clippers are missing some key people here?
It's neither. It's more about having Kevin Durant on your team because the Clippers are going to key in on Kevin Durant. Now, all of a sudden, Devin Booker is going to get those one-on-one matchups, and he's going to be able to go as the secondary or third-area defender and be able to do his thing. This is the luxury of having Kevin Durant.
Did you say did you say third-area?
Oh, no. Did you say third
secondary and third area? That's fine. Secondary, third area, tertiary. All right. Let's talk. You did, and that's what matters, my friend. All right, how about this? The Sixers, they were the first team to advance with a sweep, pull out the brooms. This is despite the up-and-down play from James Harden, Joel Embiid on the bench with an injury. They will face the winner of Hawks and Celtics next. So, Ramona, what's the bigger concern? Is it Embiid's health or is it consistent play from Harden?
I actually think it's consistent play from James Harden because if they end up playing the Boston Celtics, these two teams have played each other before, and Boston tries to take Joel Embiid out. Embiid passes the ball at a double teams much faster than he used to. Who's he passing to? James Harden. I think Tyrese Maxey has been great in the previous series, but James Harden is there for this series in this role to give Joel Embiid a second option and not a tertiary or thirtiary or whatever option you guys were talking about.
Oh, she got it. All right. From the team that was swept to a team that avoided being swept, the Timberwolves. Ant Edwards had 34 points, but the story was the Nuggets almost come back, right? 12-point comeback in regulation. Minnesota was able to hang on in overtime thanks to clutch Anthony Edwards. But, Richard, what's the bigger deal? Edwards' great play or the T-Wolves blowing this?
Well, look, I think it's a combination. Edwards had to overcome some mistakes. Now, look, I think Chris Finch is a great coach, but this is the second time that we've seen him not call a timeout in certain situations. Your young team is is getting handled by the number 1 seed, and my biggest issue here is that, look, you had 2 timeouts. So during this last minute and a half, you could have called a timeout, settled your guys. There was 5 straight possessions where you didn't get good shots, and they were hitting threes on the other end. Forget that. I'm going to finish what I was talking about. So when you do not call a timeout, with a young team, then all of a sudden they start to get rattled. It starts to roll. Instead of you went into overtime with the timeout. They went into overtime with the timeout. You could have called a timeout at any point in time. And then what happens? You go into overtime. You're able to talk to your guys. You settle them down a little bit, and they outscore the Denver Nuggets and just ball out in the overtime. That was what Mike Malone was complaining about. But you might not have needed that. You can't go into overtime with any bullets left in your gun. Call a timeout.